comment that there's been no release yet, taken with a grain of salt, because while it is heavily monitored out there for radioactivity happens, they get very busy and information slows way down. It's only on a priority of all the people who are working out there. If there was any possibility of leaving that site and affecting the nearby communities, cities, then of course they would have a major announcement. I think what you have to do is just wait for this information to come out or use sources other than the official sources, and there are plenty that keep quiet as developed over the years. Or bring up my reporting earlier, a lot of those sources will probably start to remember we have highly radioactive material in a tunnel that collapsed. This tunnel is not a little tunnel, it's 2-inch or 2-foot thick walls on it. That was for pilings for years and years. It's 8 feet underground. It collapsed. The soil above it has started to subside. That's bad news. So last I heard, they had about a 4-foot by 4-foot hole that is formed above that collapsed site. Now, if that was to get further down, that protective layer of dirt, even further than you could possibly have release. And that's why they have taken, as they say, under an abundance of caution, immediate area, and to have people to shelter in place in some of the nearby facilities, including the mid plant, which is under construction, and that plant will ultimately be used to dispose of all that nuclear waste. So this is something that is a big concern, and it's going to take a long time before they really know what's going on. Remember, this is radioactivity, so any responding to this are going to have to get into the moon suits, be completely protected, as if they are encountering it may be the most, which is leftover plutonium.
Right. And so when you're talking about this fragile site, this really old tunnel that we're talking about that has collapsed, so we don't even know really the state of it, and to try to, quote, contain it.
Well, remember, the good news here is that the foremost experts in the world of handling nuclear waste are right there at that site. And they all know how to respond to this, but it's first of all, they're going to have to figure out what they've got. It's hard to say how they're going to try to contain it. You would think that the most rapid remedy for this situation would be to line it over the top with protective lining and then lay down soil, another several feet of soil, and then just decommission the tunnel and never go in there again.
Jerry, hold on 1 second. We'll turn something down here. I need to see the questions here. Hold on a second. I just need to have some questions. I have an audio issue.
While you're working on that, that's when I'm talking about the aging infrastructure at Hanford, is they don't want to beef everything back up and bring it to modern standards because they're just going to close that facility down, that site down, as soon as they get it cleaned up. So they're depending on a lot of really old infrastructure to keep them safe, and this is one of those times where it's been probably should have been reinforced or precautions should have been taken to make sure that it was in good shape. The work is underway. They're under such pressure out there. They're having to work so hard, so fast. There's a possibility for it that something's going to break it, and this is what happened.
Tell us a little bit about the work that was going on that would have caused this tunnel to collapse, because people were probably wondering what would be going on in the first place why would they be doing any construction around this site that would situation?
Well, I'm not sure that it was construction or repair. It may have just been repair. Remember, they've got miles and miles of roads out there, and I think initially what I heard is that it was some type of road project. So when they do that, they bring out tampers. They have to compress the soil with the large tamper device. That creates a lot of vibration. Thought here is that vibration from that project nearby is what set this off. And they got those people out of there immediately. The construction workers or repair workers who were out there, they evacuated them immediately, which was great. They got them out of harm's way. And then now they have to what to do with the rest of the workers in that area.
There is a question here. I don't know who asked it because I lost the the person, but they wanted to know, why do people have to stay indoors if no particles escape? For people having to stay indoors.
Well, radioactivity, think of it as dust. Radioactivity cannot penetrate walls.
Yeah, what about that?
It cannot penetrate walls. So if you are indoors and you have your windows sealed, you have that radioactivity. They completely ordered all of the ventilation systems dismantled, or not dismantled, but shut down. Coming into any of those buildings, they're designed, and people are even being asked to not drink or eat anything. Another precaution that is out of an abundance of precaution, I assume. But that is a typical way to protect yourself from a radioactive release. Remember, we used to have to go underground when we thought it was going to be bombs, go to the bomb shelters, and that's how prepare for a nuclear disaster. But as long as you are in a sealed, protected area.
Teresa is asking how far wide is the evacuation? I don't know the specifics. I believe it's the immediate area. But Gary, do you know how broad the evacuation area is?
Well, I know that they ordered the evacuation area is just the immediate area, but there's also the shelter-in-place area, which they ordered in the business plant, which is several hundred yards away. So they have a large area of people being told to stay where they're at as soon as they find out if it is safe to get outside. But not collapsing, so you have unstable soils, you have a lot of activity that's going to have to go on there. This is have to be very, very careful. They're going to have to imagine you're working with something so dangerous, so hazardous. It's going to take a long time to actually get in there and inspect it.
She says it's under the assumption that all of the heavy monitoring equipment was in full working order. Those of us who live at Hanford know all too well what has happened before when that assumption has been made, and there isn't a good track record out there of timely transparency when there have been leaks.
Absolutely correct. And I should have been more clear about that. She's absolutely correct. That they are monitoring equipment is old too. They in some of the areas they have some of the most sophisticated stuff available, but it cannot be depended upon. Those sensors cannot be dependent upon. In a case like this, they have to bring in fresh sensors. They will have, and that's why I'm saying it's going to take a long time. They'll have to physically get close enough to get in there and put mobile sensors on there to find out exactly what's going on. She's absolutely right, though. Been on that for years, that especially when it comes to the chemicals, not as much as the radiation, but the chemicals that come out of that plant, those sensors have been found to be inadequate in many cases.
For people who are just joining us, we're talking about the emergency at Hanford regarding a tunnel that has collapsed where they had stored for years old plutonium. And Gary Chittum from
yes, it is a nuclear emergency. Well, you can say it. Don't worry. It's kind of like terrorism. You can say it.
that site. Gary, tell us exactly where it is for people who are not familiar with Central and Eastern Washington, the Tri-Cities area, or even Hanford specifically, because they've never been to Eastern Washington. Describe that. They have a different reservation for us.
Well, it's a sprawling complex. It is gigantic. It was established during World War II when they were going to begin production on nuclear weapons. The bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki was created there, and they literally moved into this sprawling area. They moved people out of a couple of little towns. They moved farmers out, bought them out of their property, moved them along their way. It is a giant place, 580 square miles. It's just enormous. Since that time, as we said, they've been using that to decommission and try to get rid of all the waste that was developed from all those years of manufacturing, World War II all the way through the Cold War. It is in the southeastern corner of the state near the Tri-Cities. And miles is how we normally talk about it from the city of Seattle. Made that drive many, many times. It's on the banks of the Columbia River, which they use to cool the power plants when they were producing the materials, the nuclear power plants. One operating power plant at that site, the only one in the state of Washington, is there, and still continues to pump out a lot of the electricity, the power that this state uses. So this facility, this Hanford site, while is concentrated in the very center of this giant sprawling reservation, is very active. It is a city in and among itself. There are thousands of employees there. It's very bustling. It has been an economic driver for that corner of the state for 50 years and continues to be the main employer in that area and has provided a nice economy for that area. But at the same time, the neighbors there know what they're living next to. Most contaminated site in North America, and it is very, very slowly, glacially being cleaned up.
Now, when you think of the millions of liters, I know people measure them in different measurements, but if you think of all of the waste that's still stored there and the years and years that they've been working to clean up the waste there, and the hundreds of people who've worked for many, many years there, and the problems they've had with the leaks, issue for our state, Hanford.
It is, and it's on the banks of the Columbia River. So when you think about that, and you think about how slow it's been, the leaks, the tanks are getting old, they are leaking. Some of them have already leaked, others are. Some of the newer replacement tanks have leaked. That radiation is exposed to the Columbia River in amounts just a certain threshold. That's a big, big problem because think of the entire agriculture area that pulls its water out of the Columbia River. Think of the endangered salmon. Think of the people whose drinking sources come out of there. And what you're talking about is spreading nuclear contamination from a small pocket in a corner, southwest Washington, southeast Washington, all the way along the Columbia River to the states of Washington and Oregon out to the sea.
In this particular tunnel, as you know, Gary, what was or is still in that tunnel? What would be the danger currently in that tunnel?
We don't know exactly what it is, but we've heard it already described as highly contaminated waste. So you can have a mixture of just about anything in here because it's not just radiation. They probably have highly radioactive material since this is going to Purex be disposed of. So there's probably highly radioactive material. There's probably some very dangerous gases that are contained in there. Now remember, these people handle hazardous waste all the time. People double, triple package everything and put it in a particular area that they feel is safe, but the whole tunnel collapsed. So what is safe at this point? But this could also be low-level radioactive materials, all the way from garments that people have worn in areas, protective garments that they've worn that they don't know how to dispose of properly at this point. So they'll put them in there. They can put machinery. They can even put vehicles that were used to transport people who had been exposed or where they have things. They can store just about anything in these tunnels, and they do. As they try and just get everything out of any kind of dangerous area, any kind of area where it could be exposed to people, they'll just store it in places like this as they try and work around this big mess that they have going on.
Concern at this point, and when do you think we might get more information in terms of the potential dangers that exist currently? If they're saying, workers were injured and people were evacuated around the immediate area, will stay indoors, how long might that last?
Well, like I said, this is going to be a very slow and painful process, and they're going to be very, very careful. They're going to try and make sure that it's completely safe, that everybody who's nearby has been completely checked out.
Subscribe to the Trumpet News channel. We always get the good stories, so make sure you're subscribed. If you want to be on top of all the breaking news, subscribe. Social networks.
Long for them to get this information and make it available to the public. This is how they work. They have to know exactly what's going on before they say something. Over the years, we've tried to get them to speed up their information process, but they just don't do it. They run it their way, and this is the Department of Energy's federal site, and they will continue to run it that way. But we're making information coming from.
All right, guys, I wanted to tell you real quick with the news conference that they just had in Washington about this emergency. They didn't want to say nuclear emergency, but it is an emergency. They had everybody locked. They still do. I think they're still locked down. We haven't got all the news out yet. It's still coming out. But with the news conference that they just gave, it didn't look too convincing. It didn't look promising at all. If anybody missed that news conference, I'm gonna go back to that news conference. I'm gonna let you guys listen to the guy that actually is supposed to be very knowledgeable about what's happening there. And tell me if he doesn't look like he's a little bit worried. You just tell me. Everybody on Facebook is saying the guy didn't look convinced. Let's go ahead and go back to that news conference real quick.
Plutonium, give me a second here.
Click on the spot there. Here's the plutonium site. Let's see here. According to the Department of Energy, the soil spans about 20 feet by 20 feet. I'm just trying to catch up here. Yeah, they're still saying basically no injuries.
Well, did they say 20?
We're just gonna go ahead and listen to this. I think they'll be playing the news conference here in just a minute. So let's just go ahead and listen. This is also just recorded about. So let's go ahead and watch the rest of this.
So this is where they removed the plutonium, uranium from the waste. Plutonium and the uranium from the waste, and then sent it off to be buried
No,
in a proper site.
no specifics here. Just as the alert went out about 8:30. No specifics. The authorities say the collapse took place within one of two rail tunnels under that Purex site containing contaminated materials. One tunnel is about 360 feet long, the other about 1,700 feet long. The partial collapse where the two tunnels joined together. According to the soil subsided in an area that spans 20 feet by 20 feet. The discovery was made during routine surveillance of the area. So, what does that mean? No
Well,
workers
that
were
means
inside the
obviously nobody was in there and experienced the actual collapse.
Right.
So somebody noticed a depression, and once they checked the monitors, then they realized that they got a problem. I'm sure that tunnel is heavily monitored, and some kind of visual confirmation on what happened.
So it says no radiation has been detected, so it's possible that a collapse within that tunnel, it could have been without problem.
Well, yes, that's absolutely true. And remember, there is 8 feet of soil over the top of it. In that regard, you have a good protective barrier, but it's not a permanent barrier. So they're going to have to figure out whether or not, as that soil subsides, that any of the materials inside will be exposed, and that's what's going to take a long time. I really just have been racking my brain to figure out how they're going to handle this. And I can't figure out for the life of me what they're going to do, unless, as I said, lid over the top of it, they decommission the tunnel, and everything that's in there stays in there, and they never go in there again. And that's short of that. I really don't know how they're going to make this up.
Susanna Frame's been covering issues with Hanford for several years now. It is, yes. This is just sobering, Gary. When you think about the fact that it's the nation's most contaminated nuclear site, cleanup's expected to last several decades more. It contains 56 million gallons of radioactive waste, has 177 underground tanks. How will it ever be cleaned up?
A lot of people asking that question, Joyce, and they're working on the vitrification plant, which will turn that radioactivity into glass. It's not done. It's not ready. They've been working on it for years and years. It's billions of dollars over budget. Still don't know if it'll work. This process is a race against time, because you're trying to build something that is being held in tanks that are way past their date of expiration, and they are holding some of the hottest, most corrosive materials known to man. This is a big race to try and get that before those things start to completely get into the groundwater.
And then let's just talk for a moment, and we could never do them justice, about all the people, the 9,000 people who work in Hanford.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the people who are hoping, who are being told that they are going to work safe every day because they have protective gear, that the site is safe, et cetera, et cetera. But you've covered stories, and so has Susanna, where that's turned out for many states, but for most, the assumption is that they are perfectly safe. But I mean, that's a contaminated site, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's a very, very dangerous place to work. And as all of the reporting that we've done over the years, we've always tried to report about the people who work there and how dedicated they are to this, how they knowingly go to work every day knowing that they face incredible danger there. They're doing what they can, they're trying. There are this is just a very hard situation to manage there. They have just so many problems. They've got so many exposures of people to gases, to whatever. There's all these other incredibly dangerous pills that people are exposed to out there, and they'll get sick.
If you guys are new to Trumpet News Channel here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, because this is a normal thing that we have here, always on top of the breaking news. We monitor the forums, all the social networks, and the mainstream, and we aggregate all the news here for you guys to know when it breaks. So subscribe and enable instant notifications so you'll know when we go live. Also, subscribe to the channels below, our social networks. If you're on Twitter, you'll get an instant notification when we go live as well. All right. This is an ongoing, getting to you guys some more news here from the people on the ground here. I will be updating you here in just a moment, so stay tuned.
This is not a Seattle issue, it's an EPA issue. The EPA is doomed. Let's go through some of these.
Well, most of your people are very informed. I hate to say John's not. This is not an issue that is confined to any corner of the state. This is an issue that affects the entire United States. This is a facility, and it belongs to all of us, and the people who work there, important to people outside of that community, those communities, as they are inside.
It has the most toxic waste in the United States.
Gary, Joyce, I'm going to interrupt you guys. There is a live press conference right now happening in Richmond.
So we're gonna take that. Facebook?
Next slide.
All right.
Stand by.
Okay, listen to this, guy. This is the live press conference. Tell me if this guy does not look like he is lost, confused, and doesn't know what the heck's going on. He's giving a press conference trying to calm everybody down, and he can't even, he's out of breath. Press 1 if you're liking the Trumpet News Channel coverage. Type 1 in the chat room.
To be honest, right now, not a feeling of worry or anything like that. People are just setting up here. There's a lot of volunteers here in the room, so we're kind of waiting to hear from the necessary parties who aren't necessarily in this room, but we're getting phone calls and things like that as new information comes, and we're being directed to the Hanford app and things like that. But a feeling of worry, not necessarily in this room right now.
Hey, Rex, what we've heard reports of hundreds of workers on Hanford to evacuate.
All right, this wasn't the other guy that did the news conference. This is a different guy. The other guy, I guess they took him off the job because he made everybody. This is a different guy.
That anyone located north of the wide barricade is sheltering in place right now. So we don't have exact numbers on how many people exactly are on the site right now, but the Department of Energy official told me that anyone north of that wide barricade is sheltering in place.
We want to show you on air this picture. We absolutely just out. This is a picture of the area in question. You can see kind of mid upper left corner, there's kind of a black dark hole down in the area, and the soil has subsided.
All right, I think the guys will come on here in just a second. Hold on.
Knowledge that we have right now of this photo, that is what we are hearing.
Okay, and then so this is the area that they can put into Howland, that they send the emergency notification, which is a survey design that people will radio on an industrial mining monitoring, as well as capturing video footage, which is very well.
China syndrome.
right now.
All right, this, just watch this. Tell me if this doesn't just give you such a good sense of, it instills in you confidence. This guy looked completely frazzled. And this guy in the red is supposed to be the expert here. He's supposed to be the expert here. And tell me if he doesn't look like he's.
Hey, Morgan, let me interrupt you there. We are about to get started here on the press conference. I'll answer your question real quick. Anyone that's not on the site is safe right now. There's no threat to the public, but Henderson is here to start this press conference up. So just thought we'd interrupt you there and then let you know.
For all you guys that saw the press conference just a little bit ago, we're going to replay it right now. How many of you guys thought he looked completely frazzled and out of his mind? Press 1 if you thought he was nuts. He looked nuts.
We're waiting for this press conference to start in Hanford on the nuclear site where we've been listening. And thanks for being patient with us. As you've been listening, it appears that there's certainly no threat to anyone who's not on the site at Hanford. We're waiting to hear what's going on. But Gary, I've been reading some of these comments from Corey. My house is about 25 miles from Hanford, not sweating, and it's been a mess there for years, is her comment. It's interesting the different attitudes of people who live in and around the Hanford area. And then the people who feel like, oh, you know, this is much ado about nothing. What do you make of that?
One of the titles adjacent. You know, there are people I've interviewed out there who are 80 to 90 years old, even older than that, who worked at that facility their whole adult lives. The communities themselves have never experienced any kind of, that we know of, radiation exposure. So they're very correct in saying, you know, unless there was some kind of major explosion, any risk when they're not at that major site or at that site, they're not in any potential danger. But there are problems that could happen.
All right. So for some reason, this channel here is not covering his speech here. For some reason, I don't know why. We're going to go back that I recorded and we're going to listen to it because they're not letting us hear it. They're just getting some other guy on here talking that sounds like he knows what he's talking about. This was the official news press conference here, and they didn't cover it.
If there was that catastrophe never happened.
Gary, let me interrupt you. We're going to go to a Facebook Live right now that's happening.
Stupid. They missed the whole thing.
That's really the situation right now. Assessing the situation to really know what caused the roof to cave in. May not know that for some time, but right now emergency responders are still on the scene gathering data. I would again urge people to go to Hanford.gov's Facebook, Hanford.gov. There's a red bar there, click on that for information that's updated this month.
They're still live here, but they missed the whole conference. See, this is King 5. They totally missed it here. I don't know what the heck they're thinking there. Let me go back and see if I can play it for you.
Usually involves one government person from the federal government, one person from the state government, and at least one person from the facility itself. And what they'll do is they'll set out information, they'll get together, they'll come up with a combined statement, a unified statement, and that's how they will present it so that there's no surprises, so that one organization is not surprising the other organization with details that may not be correct or may come out too early. So that's probably the information gathering nerve center that they've set up, and they're preparing to go public with a unified statement that everybody has had a chance to look at and feels comfortable.
We have some fun here, Mike.
Okay, we're going to go to the news conference here in just a second here. Let me get it up here for you. All right, here we go. All right, listen to this. Let's just go ahead and listen to this one. This was the news conference that took place about 20 minutes ago. Like I said, listen to this guy's voice. Tell me if he's not shaking in his boots. There is a lockdown. There's a lot of, from what we read on the Facebook pages of loved ones that are working in the area, they are locked down. They are not allowed to leave. They said there was contamination everywhere. This is what some of the people that were working there are saying. And listen to this guy's voice.
The DOE was in charge of the Hanford site. We're going to go ahead and play what they reported on their Facebook feed as part of their official press conference explaining what exactly happened this morning.
Hanford.gov, there's a red bar at the top that takes you the latest information about what's going on with the Hanford site. But again, right now, all employees have been accounted for, no injuries and no evidence of a radiological release. So this is going on in the 200 East area of the Hanford site. The Hanford site right here. The 200 East area is right there. This is going on at a facility known as Purex, which is located about here. Employees at Purex this morning happened to notice a kind of soil that had sunk over one of the tunnels adjacent to the facility. The Purex facility is a formal chemical processing facility. At that point, after noticing the soil had sunk over one of the tunnels, there was an emergency declared. Those employees, there were about a half dozen of them, were evacuated. Again, no injuries. All employees are safe. No evidence of radiological release. Those employees are safe. All employees at 200 East had been told to take cover. This was early this morning. Upon an additional investigation, crews noticed a portion of that tunnel had fallen. The roof had caved in. About a 20-foot section of that tunnel had gone. Upon that discovery, all employees in the Hanford site, again, this site here had been told to take cover. What that means is shelter in place. This is purely precautionary because, again, no employees were hurt. There was no spread of radiological contamination. That's really the situation right now. Crews are still on the scene assessing the situation to really know what caused the roof to cave in. May not know that for some time, but right now emergency responders are still on the scene gathering data. I would again urge people to go to Hanford.gov's Facebook, Hanford.gov. At the top of the website, there's a red bar there. Click on that for information that's updated this week.
Now,
And that was the official.
how many of you guys think that guy looked like he didn't know what he was talking about? He looked scared.
The two
Press one if you do.
pointed out earlier that we heard were no injuries reported at this point, and then also no radiological release or contamination. That's what a lot of people are hoping for right now. But you still think about the people who are sheltered in place right now, and there's a little bit of concern there.
Yeah, of course, no spread, no radiological release, as you mentioned, but you still get concerned when you hear winds always become a topic of conversation, especially in that area. They can be blowing dust at times, especially in the North Little Basin. Here's the good news, folks. There is going to be none of that over the next 24, 48 hours. You need 30 to 40 mile an hour winds to really pick up some of the dust in that area, if any at all. You can see 5.
All right, we got a news conference from the president going on right now, so let's go ahead and go to that real quick.
This area is only at 3 miles an hour. So you need much stronger winds to really start to pick them up and move those dust particles or sand across parts of the inland northwest. The baby just saying peace. Why did he go like that? Peace, bro.
Also, some breaking news here coming up here. We, from what I'm understanding, from some of the reports I'm looking at online and respected sites in the Middle East, British, U.S., and Jordanian forces are amassing for Syria. So there's some big things going on over there as well. And they are still continuing the pressure on North Korea, so we'll see where that all goes. I believe North Korea just threatened to destroy the White House once again yesterday. So they're still blustering, they're still speaking out against America in many different ways. And we continue to put the pressure down. So it's getting more intense over there in North Korea as well. Next, I guess it looks like Iran is getting into the mix too. They've been just launching some missiles from their submarines. From what I understand, the submarines that they launched their missiles from look suspiciously like they've been built by the same people that the North Koreans are using. So the same technologies, the same missiles that are being used in Iran are being used in North Korea. So are they trying to say that we're going to go into Iran here now? What's going on here? I'm hearing that song in the background. It's the end of the world as we know it.
Peter's on the phone. Hold on. Good afternoon. The President this morning met with General McMaster. As you know, General McMaster is helping lead the team that's organizing the President's upcoming foreign trip. And this week, the President has been focused on meeting with the team, getting ready for the various stops that he'll be making and meetings that he's going to be having. Conversations with world leaders, the President has seen a great desire for America to re-engage and be a leader once again in helping solve the world's complex problems. And he's already made moves both behind the scenes with leaders and his public statements to show them that America is reasserting its leadership on the world stage. These visits are another important part of this American resurgence. While on the trip, the President will further our strategic objectives in the region, creating new opportunities that will strengthen the United States and our allies while weakening our enemies. I know many of you are interested in the logistical aspects of this trip, and we'll be trying to have a week on those aspects of the trip as soon as we can, so stay tuned. Also on the subject of foreign visits, I'd like to announce that the President has invited the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates to visit the White House on May 15th, and the Crown Prince has accepted. We look forward to welcoming the Crown Prince and see the visit as an opportunity to deepen cooperation with a key partner in the Middle East. Moving on to domestic matters, the Vice President spent his morning today on Capitol Hill. He met privately with Majority Leader McConnell and also had individual meetings with other senators. The discussions focused primarily on the path forward for the American Health Care Act in the Senate and how the administration can work with Congress to craft a tax reform bill that follows the President's priorities: simplification, providing tax relief to the American families and individuals. And
all right, I just got an update real quick here, real quick update. Sorry to break in there, Sean Spicer, but I have to let people know. Rick Perry, the Energy Secretary, I believe, is in Idaho, not too far away from this nuclear emergency over there in Washington, right on the border. So he's only a very, stone's throw away. He's actually there right now. Isn't that weird? Actually talking about nuclear. He's there for some kind of conference or something, or some kind of I don't exactly. You guys can look it up. Just Google Rick Perry. I think his name's Rick Perry, and he's in Idaho right now on the border there of Washington, right where these. Isn't that kind of strange?
The Justice Department announced that the Attorney General will be speaking on opioids on Thursday at a Drug Enforcement Administration 360 Heroin and Opioid Response Summit in Charleston, South Carolina. The DEA's 360 strategy is designed to help cities and surrounding regions deal with the heroin and prescription drug abuse epidemic associated with it. This day-long event, sponsored by the DEA, Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, and the University of Charleston School of Pharmacy, will bring together stakeholders and professionals working in law enforcement, prevention, education, treatment, recovery, healthcare, and emergency response. In Washington, Secretary of Commerce Ross is speaking this afternoon at the 47th Conference of the Americas, which is taking place at the State Department. The event brings together administration officials and distinguished leaders from across the region to focus on major policy issues affecting the hemisphere. Also at the State Department this morning, Secretary Tillerson participated in a signing ceremony for the United States and Georgia General Security of Information Agreement with the Prime Minister of Georgia, a major milestone in security cooperation between our two countries. The President was also pleased to see several top administration officials recently move to the Senate. Last night, Heather Wilson was confirmed to be Secretary of the Air Force. And Governor Branstad was approved by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to be ambassador to China and is moving on for a vote on the floor of the Senate. The President also looks forward to seeing Dr. Scott Godwin confirmed by the full Senate to serve as Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration later today. Paris Climate Agreement. The President has been meeting with his team for quite a while on this matter, and he will not be making an announcement regarding that agreement until after he returns from the G7. Glad to take your questions. Caitlin.
Thank you, Sean. We got two questions for you today. The first one is, why did the president wait 18 days to fire Mike Flynn as the White House was informed of his conduct and warned that he was a potential target for Russian blackmail? Because you realize the timing of this makes a lot of people think that he wouldn't have been fired if the story had not come out.
Well, I think, first of all, let's look at the timeline. Sally Yates came here on the 26th of January. Then she informed the counsel's office that there were relevant to the situation. It wasn't until about 7 days later that they had access to those documents. After that time, they did what you should do, frankly, is an element of due process reviewing the situation. They informed the president right away after they were informed of her giving us a heads up. And ultimately, the president made the right decision. But I guess the question, or the point that I would put back on you is, somebody came over, gave us a heads up on a situation. We were provided those materials 7 days later, reviewed those materials, underwent a process of reviewing the situation, and ultimately the president made a decision and it was the right one. So I think that the process worked, frankly, when you think of the time in which we had the information to make the decisions the president made.
You're saying the president stands by that decision, he made the right decision, but why does he continue to defend Mike Flynn?
Well, I don't think it's not a question of defending Mike Flynn or not.
He should speak of
Right. I think Mike Flynn is somebody who honorably served our country in uniform for over 30 years. And I think, as he's noted, Lieutenant General Flynn was asked for his resignation because he misled the vice president. But beyond that, I think he did have an honorable career. He served with distinction in uniform for over 30 years, and the president does not want to smear a good man.
What was his role at the White House in those 18 days? Was he still fulfilling his national security advisor duties?
I'm not going to get back into it. I will say, as I mentioned, the time.
Worried him that he was still doing that when he was a potential target?
One thing that I think is important to know is let's look at, again, how this came down. Someone who is not exactly a supporter of the president's agenda, who a couple days after this first conversation took place, refused to uphold a lawful order of the president, who's not exactly someone that was excited about President Trump taking office or his agenda. She had been, hold on, Caitlin, hold on, Caitlin, let me answer the question. She had come here, given a heads up, told us there were materials, and at the same time, we did what we should do. Just because someone comes in and gives you a heads up about something and says, I want to share some information, doesn't mean that you immediately jump the gun and go take an action. I think if you flip this scenario and say, what if we had just dismissed somebody because a political opponent of the president had made an utterance, you would argue that it was pretty irrational to act in that manner. We did what we were supposed to do. The president made ultimately the right decision, proven that she was appointed by the Obama administration a strong supporter of Clinton. So that's now, I think, number 4. So, Jim.
Thank you, Sean. Are the council meetings a sign the president is vacillating on their support and undecided whether to remain in the agreement or withdraw?
No, I think it's simply a sign that the president wants to continue to meet with his team, develop meet with not just the economic piece, but his environmental team, and come to a decision on what's the best interest of the United States, using the expertise that surrounds him. Yes.
What would winning mean to him?
I think reducing the threat, especially when it comes to ISIS and the Taliban.
Reducing the threat.
Well, I mean, minimizing, eliminating, but obviously, in the best case scenario, we want Egypt. I'm going to answer Mara's question. I think the answer is that we want to eliminate the threats that are against our national security and our citizens, our allies. So we need to fully eliminate any threat around the globe, frankly, not just in Afghanistan, that poses a threat to our people and our allies.
I have a question as he considers what to do next and if he wants to put more troops. At one point, we had 100,000 troops there and we didn't eliminate the threat. Why 15,000?
Well, I think that's a very Washington question, meaning just because you spend more, throw more people, doesn't mean you're doing it in the most effective way. I think one of the things that he has asked his national security team to do is to actually rethink the strategy. What are we doing to achieve the goals that you were asking about? How do we actually, how do we win? How do we eliminate threat? And I think doing that isn't just a question of throwing money or people, but looking at the mission and the strategy, and that's what the team has been doing holistically, not just in Afghanistan, but the total beyond Afghanistan. It's also the way that he's asking to look at the threat that ISIS poses.
Will he explain this to the American people or will he just kill them?
I mean, I don't want to get, I don't know how he's going to do that.
All right, but we're gonna go back to the news conference there here in just a second here, so just hold tight. Spicy Spicer is not too spicy. We're just gonna move on here.
Directly harm Syrian Kurds against ISIS. Has the president discussed this plan with the leader of Turkey, and what was the reaction of Turkey?
I don't know if he's addressed this to the president yet. I do know that yesterday the president authorized the Department of Defense to equip Syrian Democratic Forces as necessary to ensure a clear victory over ISIS in Raqqa, Syria. Yes, the SDF, partnered with enabling support from U.S. and coalition forces, are the only force on the ground to successfully seize Raqqa in the near future. We're keenly aware of the security concerns of our coalition partners in Turkey. We want to reassure them.
All right, we got some footage of the evacuation. We got some footage of the evacuation of the Hanford site. Let's go ahead and pull that up here in just a second here. Let me get that footage to you guys. That's what I'm saying. That's why subscribe to Trumpet News. This is where you find all the good stuff. Here we go.
Drill or an emergency. Gotta take cover. Well, so it's either a drill or an emergency.
All right, so that's just a loop there. A loop of them getting out of Dodge. Let's go back to the news conference. Let's pull up this news conference here real quick.
Course from our TriCaster, and we're talking today about the emergency that was declared earlier this morning at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation here in Washington State about a tunnel with nuclear waste that collapsed. This is, of course, the largest nuclear waste storage site in the United States. I have Gary Chittum, former environmental reporter here at King 5, a name that you guys should all be familiar with on the phone. With me, hi, Gary.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great, thanks for joining me. Give me a second, Gary. You guys get your questions ready. I'm just going to share this over to our main page, to my page. Stand by. And if you guys have any questions about what happened, also get your questions ready. Hold on. 1 second. You're going to have to help me with this.
This happened at the plutonium uranium extraction plant, and there's all kinds of history of problems at this nuclear waste facility. And who knows if this is not being leached into the water table, and who knows, like China syndrome, we have no idea. But whatever's happened there has caused a emergency, and it's collapsing tunnels of nuclear waste. That is probably the most deadly kind of waste you can have on planet Earth. Probably will never go away for thousands of years. It's probably going to just continue to pollute the planet. But anyway, here we go.
Give us sort of a lay of the land and tell us a little bit more about this tunnel and what's actually stored inside. So Gary, I know you're really familiar with this site. Tell us what we're talking about here. What is this tunnel? What's inside? And why should we be concerned about it?
Well, this is one of those parts of Hanford that are such a concern for them right now as they are going as fast as they can to clean up that area and dispose properly of all of that nuclear waste. 56 billion gallons of it left over from the production of nuclear weapons during World War II all the way through the Cold War. So they have a big job out there. They're working very fast. And this is one of the tunnels that was constructed. I'm not sure exactly which tunnel it is because there are several under there, but most of those were designed in the early 70s, even before that. So this is a big tunnel.